dorje chanche de lo na ro da ma ba me la che che ga bo ba de sa she ja ken ken karma ba she she choy ge je pan ze na da nian da zha mian yin gen da rinpo che riwan pa sam ge xin de che pa ma mo pa yin lo do ko lo rinpo che norbo rinpo che simo rinpo che sa she
Sumba Susu Tabi Dombane Zesu Shi Denduna Gen Yu Balendiri Nyene Madobi Ri Dumbu Karuji Lawar Jawa Dela Susu Tabi Ridine Gelon Pamani Gelon Pama Gelon Madazun Gizu Pamani De Nga Ginye Pamani De Duyuno Dedra Yachichu Sumba Sale Susu Tabi Domba Yang Taba Langwe Ri Dumba De Gelon Dang Gelon Mada Gelon Mada Gizu Da Gizu Mada Ginye Da 개념이 주름 강이 받을 kim바다로도 좀 저를 찌르버 차오시 송소 원은 주변 생계기도 소소다도 뭐그 지시나 배달롱다 태바디 규제 숨기고는 된도로 그 버버 차오 텔라 당번에 배나 콜로기웨게 버첸다시 수수수에 내내 류의 진진라서 미장의 개별 사조만인데 카산 리버를 제대로 제발은 보잘라서베 겐투메 제반이 이동하지 받아라 전주기 생기게 보대한 게지 수수수에 내내 lunga yesu mi ge wale mi don ba de dibe chime ge bi gula ma ye de lunga yesu dibe chima da da gombe dombe surim ge le bur ge be le ge ji shu su so wa yin no ni ba long ne do de yin ye sem ge be ga le don ba ja je de xie song de de an ne ge don ba ne ni xia ji be don ba yin bi ja chong la ri dun bo de de da ma yin ba don ba ja chen bo yin de na ri dun ni sim ye de song ba yin 장주남전에 소소다버리는 다도 동시에 말에 전주선배 동바에 개발이 계시는 송데 소소다버리는 강로지 된도 그 된도 셰바고 태반에 소소다버도 만에 시행라 네바시대 제바 봉원이라 전주선배도 만에 시행라 팬도 보이는데 네발에 말로 팬다도 매베치로 가대시야 신다나를 소소다버도 만에 전주선배 동바게에 되는 미데 사마도 만이나 하라 소발로 소소다버도 만에 개발에 전주선배도 만에 개발 셰베치로 네베데노야 메데 소소다베 도마 소소다바네 시페베 동로 제주선베 도마데 미동을 지루시는 레네 소소다베 도마를 제 삼베게 버지 리스미데리 리듬보데 컴스미데 얼데베 삼베라나 리미기 저르시자라 랑기 동에데도 봉원데베 삼베라나 년되게 버저 저르시자와 전주전부 토버데베 삼베라나 전주선베 도베 저르시자와 대라 아마니보는 사마다만이다 할라소베 미기베치데 시페는 동에서도 냠나 라르소 미롱 지저스베 도베 데마일 전주선배도 미술에는 사마다만이 달라서버라요. 예바다. 시변에 연미동하다 냠나 라르 소름을 지게에 대한 일은 네베 대한 인노 대나 도대기게 되발레지 전주 습기 된 강하시는 전주선배 수립기도 반에 된노 세송소 야는 게에 된도 그런 네베 된도 예반메데 변나 사범메 도 게에 된도 삼등기도 뭐그게 네베 된도 예반메 왔다고 세송소 전주선배도 수수다배도 뭐대 레베 초간에 로스 미기데 나라 니되게 라발라와 니치 삼바케 버지스 네 유니 전주선배도 버주와 인데 멤베 셈다 봉에 셈마도 치로 대들에 티버신 버리다 되면 구조숨을 교수소 수수다배도 버리도 강원지다 되면 대내 전주선배 땡게 강사 이노 갑자기 이징이 너무 다바를 보지기는 교수는 좀 벗어요 리우데 개바오
To continue Reading from the Jewel Ornament, the Pratimoksha vows. The third topic is the Pratimoksha vows, which are in substance 4, but 8 due to support. Within the 8, except for the Upavasata, the day-long fasting vows, any of the other 7 should be taken as the working basis. The 7 types of Pratimoksha are the Bhikshu and the Bhikshuni, the Shikshanamana, or the training vows, the Shramanera, the Shramanerika, the novice vows, and the Upasaka and Upasaka lay precepts. Within the Pratimoksha precepts, there are 7 ways to take the precepts perfectly. There are the Bhikshu, Bhikshuni, the nun in training, the novice monk, novice nun, the lay householder, and the lay male householder and lay female householder. These are divided into lay persons and the renounced. Why do you need a Pratimoksha vow in order to cultivate the engaged bodhicitta? It should be understood that they are needed as a foundation through 3 reasons: the analogy, the scripture, and reasoning. For the analogy, it is not proper to invite a great monarch to reside in a place where there's dung, dirt, or uncleanliness. That place should be well cleaned and decorated with many ornaments. So too, one cannot invite the king of bodhicitta to reside where the body, speech, and mind are not bound from the non-virtues and are stained with the dirt of negative karma. Instead, bodhicitta should be invited to abide where the body, speech, and mind are free of the dirt of defilement and are fully ordained with the ornament of the discipline of abandonment. The scripture, the chapter on cultivating mind in the ornament of Mahayana Sutras says its basis is the vast vows. Thus, the day-long fasting vows, which last only 24 hours, are limited, so they are not vast. The other 7 vows are not like that, so they are vast vows. Therefore, the 7 vows are explained as the foundation for the cultivation of bodhicitta. The lamp for the path to enlightenment says, if you continually maintain a vow, one of the 7 Pratimoksha vows, or else another, you've the fortune for the bodhisattva vows, not otherwise. Therefore, any one of the 7 Pratimoksha precepts is said to be the foundation. The reasoning: by taking the Pratimoksha vows, one abandons causing harm to others and its basis. This bodhisattva's vow causes one to benefit others. Without avoiding harm, there is no method to benefit others. Some argue that the Pratimoksha ordination cannot be a foundation for taking the bodhisattva vow because eunuchs, hermaphrodites, gods, and so forth cannot receive the Pratimoksha vows, but the bodhisattva's vow can be attained by these beings. Also, the Pratimoksha vow cannot be a foundation for the maintenance of bodhisattva vow because it is cancelled at the time of death, but the bodhisattva vow is not cancelled. The response is there are 3 aspects to the bodhisattva vows, depending upon one's mental states. If one accepts these 7 types merely from a desire to have the happiness of the 3 realms, then this is discipline out of a wish for the good. If one takes these vows in order to completely free oneself from all suffering, then it is the discipline of the hearer's renunciation. If one accepts them with the attitude of achieving with the resolve of achieving great enlightenment, it is the discipline of the bodhisattva's vow. The first 2 cannot be achieved by eunuchs, hermaphrodites, gods, and so forth, and will be cancelled at the time of death. If they decline, they cannot be renewed, so therefore they cannot be the basis for the bodhisattva vow. The discipline of the bodhisattva's vows does exist in the impotent hermaphrodites, gods, and so forth, and will not cease at the time of death. If it declines, it can be renewed. Therefore, it is the foundation for the receipt and maintenance of the vows of the bodhisattva. The commentary to the Ornament of the Mahayana Sutra says, what is the basis of this attitude? The basis is the bodhisattva's vow of discipline. This discipline is necessary to cultivate bodhicitta, but it is optional for its maintenance. For example, even though it is necessary to have the discipline of dhyana in order to form the foundation for the achievement of unafflicted vows, it is optional as a foundation for their maintenance. There is no need to have a separate ceremony to receive the pratimoksha vow of a bodhisattva. This is because previously you took the hearer's training vow. If you later cultivate the special attitude, this transforms it into the vow of a bodhisattva. If you release the inferior mind, you have not given up the mind of the intent to abandon. Thus, a person possessing the Mahayana potential, taking refuge in the 3 jewels, and possessing any of the 7 pratimoksha vows, is one who has the working basis for cultivating the mind of enlightenment. This is the 8th chapter dealing with taking refuge and vows from the jewel ornament of liberation, the wish-fulfilling gem of the noble teachings.
어떻게 주다 가상 주변에 생기. 가서다 잠조디. 가상 뭐디 잠조디래 대한지 가시 가서에 잠조디를 최세 가시 주셔셔야인.
There are a few more things I would like to say about refuge, picking up from yesterday.
다들이야 잠조스체. 들이야 상기셔의 긴뒤숨 군조 가서디 군조 숨사들 가서다디 게 상기셔의 긴뒤숨리야 군조 rumbuches 다 rumbuches 라고하다 군조사디 안에 표기 올라서 넘버 저기 되네 둔규를 제시하면서 없이 오늘 전에 제비나 렌나사디 rumbuches가 알아요. rumbuches들잖아요. 티규를 제비입니다. 아니 rumbuches라네. 이민이야 될 표기 올라서 남기 이 둔규를 제시 아니 군조스 교래 세마도 rumbuches 규르샤입니다. 안 잡다 rumbuches 돌아서 봐. 근데 도저 바람다 진들이야 디 집어를 차지 미세기 그런 가수에 미세 구주매를 치자로 맨로 근데 인도스탄에 바지를 rumbuches 제시 뒤에 둔규를 제시 군조스 교인사
When we go for refuge to the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And so the three jewels, when we say jewels in Tibetan, the word was translated from Sanskrit, is a meaning translation and as kunchok, or the rare and supreme, sublime. So actually, if we translate the Sanskrit word ratna, it literally means jewels. So the literal translation would have been jewels. But the Tibetan translators did not translate it literally. They translated it figuratively. And the reason for this is if they translated it literally as jewels, then jewels can be understood as actual physical jewels, the stones of diamonds and so forth. And so that wouldn't have much meaning. For that reason, instead of translating it literally, they translated it figuratively.
대안되네 군조 사디 군세 넘버 2개 관에 군세 넘버 2개 관에 에네 군조디 rumbuches라 최총과 더 이신기 노부를 못해라 이신기 노부 rumbuches라 최총과 인상 디 윤세를 때네 에네 rumbu rinchen 좀 제 rumbuches 다고 군세 대래서.
But when we say jewels, there are 6 reasons why the three jewels are comparable to precious gemstones, precious jewels. They're comparable to the wish-fulfilling gems. And so, for that reason, there are several reasons why the 3 jewels are considered precious in this way.
대안 티버시 규라면 된주래. 티버시 규라면 된주디 아주 다 벽에리아 규라면 된주세 용자래. 다 임비냐 산스키리 돌이야 슈베기 규라면 갸베당. 다나 신기 야나게돌 슈베 규라면기 다 텐주 챤래야 구조 넘버 예와스 구조 넘버 예와체 자게나 바오싱 룬 섬 다들 지시하래 아주 배 귀라메 텐주기 리뷰 참조로 쉐베 걸이야 바지 구조기 넘버 예와스하르 되지 소요하래 리뷰 참조로 리뷰 당보니 참조로 쉐베 걸이야 구조 넘버 예와래 주사비 다 간다라야 디나로래야 왼주지 넘버 초부디 소요하래
And so these 6 reasons are taught in the Supreme Continuum, the Uttara Tantra Shastra. Actually, in Tibetan, we say the Supreme Continuum, or Ju Lama in Tibetan. Actually, if you look at the Sanskrit, the extant Sanskrit copies of the text, as well as the Chinese versions of the text, it has a different title. It's called the Ratna Gotra Vibhanga, which means the distinguishing the classes of distinguishing the types of the jewels. And so this is what is written in the Sanskrit and Chinese copies. And in the Tibetan translation as well, and the transitions between each chapter, it says something like, this is the first chapter from the distinguishing the classes of the jewels, or the Ratnagotra Vibhanga. In any case, this treatise gives the 6 reasons why the 3 jewels are similar to jewels.
대양 중화권지 지면지 튼된체는 지den기 가자 긴규르체다 초니 칠 교화면지 군초니 살 다들이 순화하다 윤진나마 초 다들 윤진나마 초대 지금 중화권 맞서 당보는 가르래 중화권 맞서 직된도 중화권 맞서 직된나야 아니 rumbuche 디조베 공부요 알았어 공부예는 신기 군조스무대야 직된도 중화 공부를 했어 치매 치르스들사네 rumbuche 베나 팔람라 소바디조 가르로 쿠란라야 다 치매메바 쿠란게 닝불라야 치매메바 다든지 예반은 신기 군조스물이 비냥 가르로지 루아메바 다 루아메베 루에 치마단 제와 다든지 치마단 제와라서 다든지 먹고시 소야 다 레지도 슈슈가스케면도 가다든지 견제나 뭐 조기고 안에 아니 상계체의 긴주 숨데 림부체의 최총과 윤진나무 주권은 윤부체의 최총과 림부체의 자위의 인상 이 윤생의 단에 군조 숨리야 군조 숨마 림부 제숨체 나고 윤제대 둔딘치는 투단된바다 지딩이 겐도 규르바다 되네 초도 규르바다 규르메바.
This is so. The 6 reasons are presented in a stanza from the Supreme Continuum, the Ju Lama, and this stanza reads, because they only appear rarely, because they're stainless, since they are powerful, because they are the ornaments of the world, because they are supreme, and because they are changeless. For that reason, they are called the jewels. So when you say because they occur rarely in the world, jewels are rare, and because they are rare, they are precious. So they appear rarely in the world, and so the 3 jewels are similar. They only appear rarely in the world. The second reason is that they are stainless. So in saying because they're stainless, diamonds and jewels such as that, in their essence, have no stains. They are free of any stains. Likewise, the three jewels are free of the stains of deceptiveness. And so these are two of the reasons. There's a lot to say about all six of these reasons. It's not necessary to say that all now, but in any case, for these six reasons, the three jewels are similar to, or like, or comparable to jewels. And so that is the reason why they are called the three jewels.
다 될래야 군저 숨제 요가디 군저 직모인바 단남 유인지 출로 망부치리야 단남 육군저스 라고 하는 이제 god 사디 지든 거버려야 아주 섬서 배주던 주사 군저라고 하대 이네 디치기 다다르 비시다 되요만 다디 제바스키라게 메데버시 다양한 가족이 잠내로 군저스 라고 얘기인자 디균셀 되네 엔지든 거버려야 봐 군저스 타니 자르샤고 마도베 다디 타니디 다다 되면 하고 하면 딱 나다 개봤습니다. 주로 망부질이야. 지 겸내 지구마도 배. 지든 거버 지구마도 배 망부지 그지. 용로 말해. 야 주로 가실이야. 난 망부들이 어디야. 다 겸내 섬을 배. 겸내 망부르지 어디가 그래. 겸내 망부지. 다 이내 남배기 때네 겸내 쉐두사네. 겸내 숨레 마마와 숨레 머녀와 나들이 군저 숨 샤과가 데 안에 가서다 균세 여버렸어.
Now when we say the three jewels, there are three, not one. In many traditions, many religions of the world, there is one source of refuge. This is the God or the Creator. In Tibetan, sometimes we would translate God or Creator as the jewels in Tibetan, or call it a source of refuge, but that doesn't quite fit. There's no real connection, and I'm not sure if it is appropriate. In any case, in many religious traditions of the world, they assert that there is one source of refuge, a single Creator God. Other religious traditions say that there are many different gods. However, for Buddhism, the sources of refuge are neither more nor less than three, and so there are reasons why there are said to be three refuges.
데레야다 가상 귤라메게 롱데게 템바템바 로드인기 티버스온데 체스온데 메바남 요한세데 교수나 버샤바 인세 다간다라 두 가르에 데 티버스움당 데네 다 제바스움다 메바스움 요한도 세네 다 교수나 버샤바 인스타 드레인두산에 다디 텔라 두저르진 숨서마레 지진 숨게 두저라 다나 신기 교순 소소를 매베게 간사 교순 소소를 매베 간사다 대다가 매베 왕도 체네 안 꾸저 숨나 버샤바 예수.
It is as in the scripture, the citation from the Supreme Continuum that we mentioned yesterday, which reads, "The teacher, the teachings, and the effects, because of different interests and the vehicles, they are presented as the three different jewels." And so, in any case, we have the three different vehicles. The three different types of activity, three different types of interest or inclination. And so because there are three different types of being to be guided or tamed, and each has a different interest in a particular type of the jewel, therefore there are presented to be the three different jewels.
텔레야 디시르 직슈입니다. 도두르 슈입니다. 다 리젠 숨사데 티브 심뷰 리젠당 랑게게 리젠당 아니 닌두게 리젠데 넘버 숨데 숨보들이야 아니 리젠 숨기 두자스 민다가 알았어.
Now, to explain this a little bit, when we talk about the three types of individuals, these would be the individuals of the Mahayana potential. Those are the potential of the self-Buddhas, the Prateka Buddhas, or those are the potential of the listeners. And so there are these three kinds of individuals.
대라야 당부 상계 군주디 티버 신비를 젠티 중에 랑가 톱제디 랑가 덤바텔야 메시 되는 얘기가 해서 근데 인두산에 티버 신비디 상계 공마 되는 얘기가 알았어. 상계 공마 되는 얘기 여기 인두산에 군주 송고 나는 조디 상계들이야. 되네 매바 첨부 예대비 당 상계 공마 토야 되는 첨부 예대비 인비 인상 대균자는 되네 엔 티버 신변도 잘 거네 상계 군주 송바르스.
So first, with the jewel of the Buddha, for the disciples of the Mahayana, their primary interest is to achieve the state. They seek to achieve the state of Buddhahood, so they primarily are interested in the teacher. Now, what this means is that what the practitioners of the Mahayana primarily seek is to achieve the state of Buddhahood, and so for that reason, they primarily are interested in the Buddha among the three jewels. It is the state of Buddhahood that they primarily seek and that they are especially interested in. And so for that reason, the jewel of the Buddha is particularly for the practitioners of the Mahayana.
다드네 랑게게 리젠데 주게 데네 덴베기 추 동해의 군중 빵베 냥엘에 대바데 톱제 조르체네 된돈 얘기 알아서 톱제 조르치가 알아서 대야 랑게 시바 타마베서 상게 다 긴준데 드다 시라자 콜데 쿠랑쿠랑기 지가르 랑게 천주 랑게 녀버 체시 시바 타마 내가블이야 개외신이 된 지가 말해 조데 쿠랑기 가르르다지 딘지 야나 중이디 롱중도 바로 그 가정 어렵 최제 근데 돈에 지금 알아들이 주산에 신단 이후디 시라라 과스 매매소치 다 조디 담배체 딘시기다 냠래 디 제제네 간다라 냥에는 내가 도저 조르 체대 알아보시더니 이 그런 계절을 진 주산에 다 딜 고네 엔초고 숨버려.
Now, for the self-Buddhas, the Prateka Buddhas, the self-Buddhas are primarily interested in the Dharma. That is because they are primarily interested in achieving the nirvana, that is the elimination of the truths of suffering and the origin. And the reason we say this is that in their last existence, in their last lifetime, the self-Buddhas do not pay much attention to the Buddha or the Sangha. They achieve their enlightenment on their own. They seek it on their own, and they do not really worry about whether there is a Sangha or the Buddha. They themselves meditate on their own, meditating upon the 12 links of interdependence in forward and in reverse, and do not particularly pay attention to the other two jewels. And so for that reason, what they primarily practice and what they're primarily interested in is the true Dharma, which is the practice of the two truths. Since that is their primary practice, it is for their sake that the jewel of the Dharma is primarily taught.
데네 텔라데네 다 자주면 공마토야디 딱 안아주기 지금 또 망부에 나로래 뒤에게 나로리 비네레 깨럽 나로리네 망부치 나로래야 아니 저 간다라 계획신이 소마르베다 지기 당화르제 아니 상계르부터 지기 마 코란소리야 최대 받들 댄세 람상 지기 가르에 다 미기베 쳬라서 와도 섬다지 유슈단데 지원의 지명을 해서 같은데 드부 톱라르데 지 숭교 아르드니 두스타네 에네 셴기 템베 당활이야 녀라르베 섬르베 디레르지 대시브지 딜레야 가스로지 에 셴기 템베 당활라 게베시니도 셴기 템베 당화 대토바들데네 자주베 드부 도위에 인두스타네 텔라데네 에네 긴주군조 섬르베디
Now, for the listeners, in their last lifetime, it is primarily because of the instructions that are taught by the spiritual master that they're able to achieve what they seek, the state of arhatship. And so we see this in many different sutras or in the Vinaya or in the Jataka tales. There are many different stories of listeners who, through receiving the instructions of a spiritual master, such as receiving instructions from the Buddha, then meditate upon those and achieve the different states. They achieve the forbearance of the non-arising dharmas, or they achieve the results of stream enter, once returner, or non-returner, and so forth. And so, because they are dependent upon others, they are dependent upon receiving. It is by receiving the instruction of another, the spiritual master, that they are able to achieve the state of arhatship. So, for that reason, the jewel of the sangha is taught for them, and the presentation of the jewel of the sangha is made in those terms.
다치당은 드리다 리진 숨기 뒤자를 고네 군조숨 남사 지당 드리임버에 드린 다 대기 다는 신기 군조숨 숨부 소설이야 매베 가사라 고네 만냠버 샤단라서 동부지 알때 망부지 쉬모가체 땅아란 쪽이 반 냠뇽 베라 빠네 쳬바체비미냐 군조숨부디 차상어지 아주 지 탈버주벌에 서머베 냠몽베 빼나 아주 지 남규 나사르베디 베나 일니스 서머베 저거저거를 지미나 아니 소수 쥐타브르체 안다나 신고로 가셔다지 소소스 쥐타브르체 다나 신기 소소 정보를 듣는 디즈기 에너지 디테스 가지고 펜더르치 하는 용어네. 이는 나서 첨부 내시 집어들 예비입니다. 나서 삽신들 예비입니다. 아니 명하나요 진짜. 되네 멤버 개바 멤버 첼레 개바 소머르다 멤버 스페셜리스트 나들이 첼레 개베기다 멤버들이 돼. 아니 멤버 때부터 마스베 멤버디야 믹스에 쥐어가로 가르쳐 맨주 가르쳐는 디체 대단냠도 아니 가르쳐 명가난리아 데베 거리야 아니 지 내요 매요 소머르 다 너스 이제 매요 개바 야 첼레 개바로 이제 여보세 딘디지에입니다. 안다 가르쳐지 아주지 내가 삽세는 예버도 딘디지 과하는 자리 아래 고고여지 다나 신기 나라도 상물로지 레다 녀몽베 다 내기 스르니서 말베 레뉴기 바다 담보 그러다 레뉴기 나서 삽신으로 좀 가서 포대에 인사 다디 균zel 되네 다디 저거 챵챵리아 아니 멤버도 상게 멤버도 되네 담배셔 다 매워도 되네 파베기두 안데 숨보디 녀버도 상도 버르시 도 차데 유스레 드르 주차바 세비미냐 나군조 숨사디 녀버도 상도 버지제다 디 거바여 되버시디 구조 숨고 남사셔와데 거바여 되버시 버지 아주 바지 차바체도 하루 두시스레.
And so that's a general presentation of the three jewels in terms of the three different types of individuals. And likewise, there are other different ways of explaining the three jewels in terms of the interests of various individuals and so forth. There are many different presentations, but it's not necessary to go into them all right now. But if we think about it in terms of our experience, if we sort of extrapolate from our experience with the three jewels, and we use an analogy, it's like normally when we have an illness, if it's a minor illness, just a minor, slightly bothersome illness, then we do what we can to treat it. We take some medicine, or we do what our friends say, and we do something that'll help us with the medicine, or clear that minor illness. But when we have a severe illness, if we're really seriously ill, then we go to the doctor's office or the hospital. And there is a doctor there who is skilled in medicine, like a specialist doctor. We rely on the specialist doctor, and then then the doctor gives us a specific treatment that we need to do, and we follow that treatment. And while we're receiving that treatment, there are the nurses, the trained and skilled nurses who are specialists who help us treat the illness. And so in that way, when we have a serious illness, we absolutely must have the doctor, the treatment, and the nurse. So in the same way, we are stricken with the illness of karma and the afflictions, and this is a serious illness that we have caught. And so we need to follow the instructions of the doctor, and that doctor is the Buddha. The treatment the doctor prescribes is the Dharma. And then the nurses what are like the nurses is the Sangha. And so we need to have all of these three. And so when we think about it in this way, then I think we can come to understand better the reason why we have the presentation of the three jewels. The citation from the Supreme Continuum that I mentioned before, the teacher, teachings, and its effects are presented as the three jewels in terms of the three vehicles, three interests, and so forth. This teaches the refuge in terms of the causal refuge and the resultant refuge.
도두 슈비나 텔레양 당부 규ገብ사디 컨디질이야 규ገብ스예요. 안 제ገብ사디 컨디질이야 제ገብ스예요. 사디 뭐셔 제과데 계속으로 차려요.
Now the causal and the resultant refuges are very important, and so I will explain them briefly now. But first of all, we need to recognize or understand what is the causal refuge and what is the resultant refuge.
규익감도사디 신규도 주심be 감내려 지와 가로기 지와 가로는 겹겹에 치르도 되네 겹담 분이 쉬어 다 가수에 겹도 분이 쉬인 사람으로 되게 담제해야 돼. 담제해야 될이야 규격스가.
The causal refuge is when we ask someone else who has accomplished who has become the refuge themselves, who has accomplished this, for protection and refuge from any particular fear. When we make the commitment and ask for that, that is the causal refuge.
규격도 신규도 좁으면서 가서서나 배나 개부슈는 든데 상계다 상마게 권이야 산 개부슈는 든서 와. 레인주스는 개부슈는 든로기 개베세 개부 개부부 다 개베세 프린스 Prince Siddhartha sommarbashi shunu tundrubdi sangma ge gongya shunu drusu gara da di gyulya kunjosu trubsimba sananda da Quran sanggewe ne sangges chezang tene tempa shaka tubadi tene gebu shunu tundrugi gyulya trubsimbige da sanggeru chadi gara chezang tan dona ji garshure 아주 남규지 상계의 전주 선바다들 상으로 겸내 주야디 상으로 보지 내 유익 겸 잘해.
Now, when we talk about the causal refuge, this is going for refuge to the refuge that is already accomplished in another's being. This is like with the Prince Siddhartha. So the Prince Siddhartha, before he awakened to Buddhahood, was a prince, and so we call him the Prince Siddhartha. And there is the Buddhahood that is present within his being, and that had already been accomplished in his being. So this is the jewel. And so after he became a Buddha, he was called the Buddha Shakyamuni. And so when we go for it is the Buddhahood that had already been accomplished within his being. And so when we usually go for refuge to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, then this is the causal refuge.
제geb스야다 가르쳐서나 랑게 톱저르 규베 군조알이야 되네 다 집어 가능적인 직네 집어들 최외체도 다 랑게베 가르래 다데 온도 체하로 온도 체네 에너지 가르 집어를 최외 본인도 때문에 감자와디 제geb이 말아
The resultant refuge is when we when we go for refuge for protection from to the jewel that is what we are to that is when we go for refuge to the jewel that is what we shall is what we will attain. In order to manifest that, in order to achieve liberation from that fear by manifesting the quality of that, then the jewel that we go for refuge to is the resultant refuge.
다때 가르쳐서나 다때 인지미지 랑그 톱처를 기베스도 다는 수소 마음 발라 토야기 톱저기 군조스도 잡나 마음발이야더니 ben 소소 가르쳐 되지 네단 도나 기적 도도를 쉐비나 디 상기 고마 토야기 되니를 쉐지 간다 상갸지니요 아래 디걸이야 마음발하다 상계획 걸이야 저규기다 상계 줘봐 어디니 무슨 단 도나지 제geb스야데 마오발야 소수기 톱저기베 아니 구조 지리를 봐 가르쳐 되니 톱저치 가르쳐 되니 온도 제약 되게 되게 주고 요래
And so what this means is when we speak about the jewel that we will achieve, the result that we will achieve, then this is talking about the future, what we will achieve in the future. The main point of this is that when we are, so we're seeking the state of Buddhahood, and so this is what we will achieve. So in the future, there is awakening, and when we awaken, there is the Buddha that we will awaken as, and so that is the resultant refuge. It means taking that future attainment of Buddhahood as the jewel and seeking to achieve it, and so striving to achieve the state of that jewel and seeking that is the resultant refuge.
다 티버 심보 mensuegi pajir degeb debugeb debu 가수에 debugebla 겹순 로단 데 파지 상게래 파지 겹순 조금 말해 가라서는 상게 된도 얘기면 인사 상게래 debut 랑 톱질 기획에 상게래 겹순 조단 파지 매회 소시 신다서 안질 담배취 파지 톱질 시키면 양해는 돼봐 다 근데 톱질 시키려 그래.
The lower vehicles, other than the Mahayana, do not consider the Buddha, probably would not consider the Buddha to be their resultant refuge. And the reason for that is that they are not taking refuge in order to achieve the state of Buddhahood. And so this is not the result that they seek. So for this reason, they probably they do not take refuge in the Buddha as what they will achieve. Instead, what they take refuge in are the other jewels, in particular the Dharma or Nirvana.
어다드니 인주스탄에 가상만 공도 쉬면 능신기. 엔다지 대발 넘버 숨기 나네. 엔 이체베 대바다. 네베 대바디. 당외 대바 넘버 숨기 나네. 엔 네베 대바디 계셔야래수. 다 이민이야 레 당보발에 이체베 대바디 계셔. 이체베 대바디 계셔제. 대 맞아를 제제. 대 맞아 소야 토안에 되네 뭔데 대바 깨고요. 드린 인주스탄에 레 당보발라 아니 유ገብ디 계셔야죠. 유ገብ사야데 가르사나 아니 지 베낭 안주지 랑메임베 다 간다 랑게 마임베 다 가사 신제 상계베 상계의 실수는 균 아주 상계의 실수를 얘기해서 얘기해서 치 또지시 사르 다진의 삼단데야디 마체 유ገብ스 차도 드린주산에 디규제 되네 레다고 바로 유ገብ사를 계셔 다 림베신도 운도 대바사를 겐 운도 대바사데 이체가 잠시 미변바 상계 겹수 치 잠시 미변바 디 상계 공방지 수수기 토브런데베기 된 톰되기 간다라 되니를 세낸다도 드디지기 간다라 가서 이제 매발을 줄 거라서 상계 공방 톰되기 매발 줄 거라 상계 톰되기 매발게 아니 상계 공방 토양 매주셔 데 매주 개와 중요입니다 근데 그 되니를 세야 고 용으로 봐 문제가 대바사야 용고를 대 중소나 아니 리뷰 겸도 세야 용고를 리뷰 겸도 세야 인지 민지 소수기 다 망원발이야지 지 가르에 최근저디 이체 제대로 좀 해봐 최근저지 소수 유리야 최근저지 주비아지 당 아니 상계를 이체 제대로 좀 해봐 소수전이 이제 상계 공방 토야지 진짜 배주셔야지 진짜리안 리뷰 겸도 써야지 저 알아듣는 인주산에 다디 니가로 계속 차대
As I was mentioning the other day, there are three types of faith: the faith of belief, sincere faith, and the faith of longing. And among these three types of faith, it is the faith of longing that is most important, the faith of wishing or longing. But for beginners, it actually is the faith of belief that you have to have. That is like the foundation. You have that foundation of the faith of belief, and then through that, then you develop the longing. So with the foundation of that, then this is like for beginners. So for this reason, with the faith of belief, it is important for beginners to take the causal refuge in the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So this causal refuge is when we are thinking of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, individuals who are others than ourselves, and then we go for refuge to them. We say, "I go for refuge to the Buddhas and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Please regard me with compassion." That is causal refuge, and this is very important for beginners. So beginners generally have the causal refuge. And then gradually we develop the faith of longing. And so this is not just the faith of belief, but it is making the effort and seeking to develop the qualities of the refuge within ourselves. And so we develop the longing and the wish to achieve the state of Buddhahood. We have that wish, we have that longing, and then we make the efforts to achieve that state of Buddhahood. So as we make those efforts, then we really begin to seek that state of Buddhahood, and we have that faith of longing that occurs, and that becomes the resultant refuge. This is thinking about the future, the result that we will achieve in the future. When we think about the Dharma, the jewel of the Dharma, this is not just the jewel of the Dharma that is outside of ourselves, but it is the jewel of the Dharma that we will develop within our own beings and accomplish within our own beings. We are not looking for the jewel of the Buddha. We're not just looking to a Buddha who's outside of ourselves, but we're looking to the Buddha who in the future we will become. And so both of these types of refuge are very important.
다 겹선 저의 편수매 걸리야. 되는 남바 상계를 취받은 도바 참지기 때는 요라서 망부 숨으래. 다 남바 상계를 취받아야 될이야. 다 남바 상계를 취단 가장 공도 취받는 신기. 남바 상계를 이민해야 돼. 군조숨 다지 겸내 유조함. 겸내기 이제 담바체 맞지. 되지래야 알아야 버려 취브래.
Now, in the discussion of the benefits of going for refuge, these are, as we mentioned yesterday, becoming a Buddhist, it's the basis for other vows, and so forth. When I was speaking about the becoming a Buddhist, then as I mentioned the other day, this is what primarily distinguishes whether or not we're Buddhist, is whether we consider the three jewels to be the highest source of refuge or not.
나들이야 더버져. 뒤 더버디 지당 이제 김밥 본모에서 최념을 지딩도 시다시다 대 동거되시다 그거데데 계속 뭐 말해 배셨다 댕게서 데서 저바 야 댕게 또게와 데서 데서 난 더버지랑 같이 있나 다 더버지 남주들이 용대 알아 아 되게 되지
But there's a question that arises here. Now, this is not a question that is particularly important for householders or regular Dharma practitioners. But this is a question that comes up for people who are studying, for people who are debating, and people who approach it intellectual. So there is this question that does arise.
상기 유전 뒤에 되는 꾸이 넘버 잠을 땡겨 알아서 꾸이 넘버 참섬지 개진이 넘버 참섬 창배 넘버 참섬 듀기 넘버 전에 참섬 무디비 되면 넘버 땡겨 알아서 전에 이제 다 무디바는 뒤에 되는 무디비 되면 넘버 되나 되네 다 무디비 게 되면 수수주 뉴스안에 대대에 무디기 되면 수수주에 상계되라 아는 무디바디기 계속 쪽으로 와서 데 계속 줘요 뉴스안 대대 점도데 아니 점도 저거다 말했어 점도 차이나 꼭 무디바로 계속 쪽에 무디바로 와 데 뉴스안에 디다 디 점도래다 말해서 되는 줄 알아 다데 가시에서나 코랑게 오게도 상계를 계속 줘요 알아데 지당 상계를 계속 줘요 말했어 드레두사 갑델이야 드니 접수 상계를 접수 도만도 사데 지당 상계를 접수 도만도 샤워만 코랑 오게라 코랑 올라 상계를 접수 로점 시게다 상계 접수 도 샤도 말았어 지시야래 다디디 다디 대점지레 다드니 두사네 단 돈에 지당 채도 너무 상계를 이미사데 고조선 겸내게 담바 담마다 겸내게 조 담마다 디주세요
And so the question is that the Buddhas have emanations in many different forms of their body. They can emanate themselves as Indra, as Brahma, as demons, or as the teachers of non-Buddhist religions. And so if a Buddha emanates himself as a teacher of a non-Buddhist religion or the founder of a non-Buddhist religion in order to, for the sake of those disciples of that non-Buddhist religion, then when the non-Buddhists go for refuge to that teacher, does that become going for refuge to the Buddha or not? And so if that is going for refuge, then if they go for refuge to that emanation of the Buddha, are they going for refuge or not? And so one answer to this is that in essence, of course, it is going for refuge to a Buddha, but it is not in general going for refuge to the Buddhas. And so what here is important is that we are in general going for refuge to the Buddhas, not that we are necessarily in essence going for refuge to a Buddha. And so it is not necessarily that essence, but in fact that the fact that we are so if we are not going for refuge to the Buddhas in general, then this is not presented as refuge. And so in general, to distinguish between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, then what is most important is whether or not they hold the three jewels to be the supreme or the primary sources of refuge.
Jamdrusa da sangir kyos chos cheche dinjigi karshura da ji oi kyos rowa samshigi en jamdru chagi gire samchang do jamdru domba sa de ya nizu khache jamdru domba sa de kunjo sumliya kyos royi kyos ros samba zamai ba de kyos roya roga da tamcheru cheche dinre tamchedi en chisi soye 봐도 매당하는 지 dinjigi 가수에다지 그런 담제했으면 지금 안다나지 담제대야 에 뒤징에 봐지 서로 들지 봐지 과소르시 늘 차리기 길에 삼정도 안데 인주산에 나는 유저순스 비기닝 dombassade 지시 소여 받으세요 들지 봐지 있어요 안데 인주산에 대균전대네 안 점주 잠시다 안 점주 dombassade 안 같이 다 jamdru samshin bin mise tel labja labas ke gi marasum jamdru labja jamdru domba lemba yimina an deleyaji kasure dene jamdru labja tizu sungni jamdru de chagwati baji ngire sambra ji changye jidang ge bese khashe nalo le di training bena khashe gi ame khobe nano buyor 아메 코베나 녜찬 부과데 내가 텐데 겸도 너무 쉬는데 용도 있어. 나래 가시 중. 이 제라 현재 치면 나로래야. 아메 코베나 부 코드에 텔이야. 겸도 쉬는 겸도 너무 토그래 말해서 이제 기지도. 이 겸도 너무 토야야 말했어. 겸도 너무 토바리 잡을래야. 안 고랑게 뒤지 삼 동시 버치 거 봐. 버리지. 보고디 삼스게 다시 말아. 다 임비냐. 근데 겸도 제베는 핑그랬어. 아마들 부들이야 지금 미마임베 차와라서 미와한테 제기 내발라서 미와한테 핑거 맞아 토마도 남자시야다 가버렸어 근데 소샤
Now it's also said that going for refuge is the basis for all other vows. So when we talk about going for refuge as the basis for all other vows, we need to distinguish between merely going for refuge and taking the vow of refuge. So going for refuge, if we just say, I go for refuge to the Buddha, then this is going for refuge to the Buddha. So it is going for refuge, but it is not necessarily a vow. The vow of going for refuge is saying, is not just saying, I go for refuge to the Buddha, but it is also saying, I'm making the commitment to go for refuge to the Buddha, and I will go for refuge to the Buddha from now as long as I live. And so there's this commitment, and there is a definite time period of the vow for the vow, and so that is what is necessary for it to become the vow. And so the vow is, if we are making it with a commitment as a lifetime vow, that is the vow of going for refuge. And so in this way, there is the difference between merely going for refuge and taking the vow of going for refuge. If we merely go for refuge, there are not any particular precepts that we need to follow. But once we take the vow of going for refuge, then we do need to keep the precepts of going for refuge for as long as we live. Now, here there is a question that comes up in some texts. There is the question, if there is a mother who is pregnant with a baby, and she goes for refuge on behalf of the baby who is in her womb, and then the question is, does this baby receive the vow of refuge or not? This is a discussion that is discussed in a text called the Chera Sheza Chemo. Now, in this text, it says that they do not, that the baby at that point does not take refuge, because the baby, in order to take the vow of refuge, you have to have the intention to take the vow of refuge, but the baby is unable to know what they're doing. However, there are benefits for going for refuge in this way. The benefit is that it's a way for the mother to make sure that her baby will not be, to protect her baby from the harms that can come from spirits and so forth. And so, even though there is not the vow, there is some benefit. And so in this way we need to distinguish as to whether the vow is taken or not.
제가 다 들려야 잠주 domba ane namju 가르쳐다 domba 계획 된려야 고래 내비 된려야 고래 숭에 지야래 양 가시에 가르송으로서나 잠주 domba 계획 된려 고래 마도 내비 된려 고 말했어.
Now, with the vow of going for refuge as the basis for the other vows, there are some who say that it is the basis for the other vows to arise, that is, for taking the other vows, but it is not necessarily the basis for maintaining the other vows. There are some who say, however, that it is the basis for both taking the other vows and for keeping them.
다이네 다 남주 용라럽들이야 계획 된라 잠주도 먹고라마 내배 된라 내가 메스
But what is generally said is that it is necessary as the basis for taking the vow, but it is not necessary as the basis for keeping the vow.
가르사나 빼나 내배 된라 내가 왜 준센데 잠주 땅와서 기기 domba 땅에 내봐야 말레스 가르사나 빼나 아주 gelom메기 나로래야 구조봉의 동시사지 용디가르다 구조봉의 동시사지 구조봉의 동시사지 용디의 윈두산에 다디 그 잠로 동안도 싫어 구조봉의 동시사지 잠로 땅바 이비냐 드네 코랑 가르쳐야 되지 domba 대려 알았어 가르사나 domba 메비나 동화사 개요 말았어 domba 메바라 동화 개다요 말았어 드네 윈두산에 디규젤 되네 gelom말이야 gelom에 동시에 나눠래 구조봉 동시에 저베 인상 디규젤 되네 네베 되려야 잠들 domba 된 예버도 그베 잡아요 말레스 네 소리.
Now, the reason why this is why it is said that the refuge vow is necessary to take the vow, but not necessarily to keep or maintain the vow, is that merely canceling the refuge vow does not necessarily cancel the other vows. For example, in the precepts of a bhikkhuni, there is the downfall of rejecting the jewels. And so by rejecting the jewels, you therefore then cancel the vow of going for refuge. Even though the bhikkhuni has canceled the vow of going for refuge, she has not lost her vows. And the reason for this is that if you have lost your vows, there is no way there can be a downfall to those vows. And so since there is a downfall, she must still have the vows. And so in that way, this is a downfall for the bhikchunis, the downfall of rejecting the Dharma. And so in this way, it is the vow of refuge is necessary as the basis for the other vows, but it is not necessary as the basis for keeping the other vows.
Tene 제단 저나는 손대야 dombokulo yumi gyoso mason wala me sondeya de garesanadne kamre domba me wala de nyene gi domba mi gyo tendare sa de so Israel.
In the treasury of Abhidharma, it says, others may have vows, of course, but not those who haven't gone for refuge. And when it says this, it primarily means this in terms of needing to take the refuge vow in order to take the fasting vows.
다 텔레 도바들 드리죠래. 니네가 도바데 니샤가 타진을 주지. 니샤가 도바를 주지. 제가 니샤가 도바 이미 인두산에 지시 소에 버기 도바 렌스에 가사질 니샤가 도바라위나 아니 도바가마데 징주고 그래서 이렇게 주죠. 다들 특신 소중디 담비 망고제가 도바서 특신 소중디 니샤가 디 가르에 다 디린니에서 산님어 마샤르기 봐도서 이렇게 주죠. 다들 인두산에 다들 니샤 타진을 지미 다 될랑나 도마시나 지로래 말했어. 가시디 도마 지로래 제사 티지 소존 링기요 말했어. 이제 기지형이가.
Now here there's a question that comes up because the fasting vows, that is the 8 precepts that you take for a day and night, the fasting vows have a time limit of a day and a night. As it says in the text, until the sun rises tomorrow. Now when you take a vow that has limited time, then that also cancels the vows that have a longer time period that you may have taken earlier. It destroys those other vows. So now the question comes up then that if we take the Mahayana Sojong vows, which have the duration of a day or night, as it says, until the sun rises tomorrow. So if we take these Mahayana Sojong precepts, which have the duration of a day or night, will this cancel out the other vows that we already hold or not? And so for that reason, some people say that we should therefore not take the Mahayana Sojong vows.
티버심비 소종디 티버심비 소종디 다 소종 산다도 티버심비 얘네 동바서머베다 다디 데레스 가서 김바 숭자시라 숭무동게 서머베 동바 숭자 망부 숭무동게 디술이야 네 고네 숭바레스 드린 주사다디 김바 디술이야 마드럽도 좀 디술이야는 좀 말해서 그렇죠.
Now other people say that the Mahayana Sojong vow is, whether we call it the Mahayana Sojong or the Mahayana fasting vows, this is primarily taught for householders. Householders and people who are not able to keep too many precepts. So it is for their sake that there are the Mahayana Sojong vows. It is for the householders, but not for monastics.
지다다 소종 텔이야 소종 디 ane seji nga ji dindechewe dinde shawimin an nyune sha chöre seji da nga je chewe nyune jidang sojong le bazam yibina ko sojong la chöre da gandra ya dona sungcha de jigu jigyane seji nga je che ma je zamre ma do da de gandre res da de tiwo chim sojong kung zhe de da tön sha wei gyu sa de tön sha ge gyu sa 퇴샤가 규가 나로래 가르스마선 이게 바제디 갤론다 갤론 마다지 참에 아니 가르스에 야라 개본 디숭 고발라서 디숭샤 퇴샤가 나 저가 심으서 부딪혀다 주 뭐 지그래 니를 좀 부딪혀 보십시오 딱 간다 로 투주지 아래 로 미투비야 야참 부딪혀 보죠 드리 디나로 갤론 말라 소바다 좀 소샤 다들이 인주사 다와나 러드 쇼와남지 티징 소종 동발레나 저거다 말해 사디 다 저어디 어디야 Jigres Lavina, and Namjundi, the Nizak Tajing Domba, the Lavina, and a Jig. 지소에 봐 도마든 지라디 용고마르스 말라바 이비네 퇴샤가 초가심이 나놀래야 아니 갤롱다 갤롱 말라 소바디 줄레는 저그래사디 간제레사 용으로
Now, with the Mahayana Sojong vows, sometimes we do it with the total fast and the vows of silence. So we can do it that way. But also there's the general way of taking the vows without the fasting and without the vow of silence. And that would be for the sojong, or the purification and restoration. In any case, what is the source for this Mahayana Sojong vow? The source for the Mahayana Sojong vow comes from the Tantra of confessing downfalls. So this Tantra of confessing the downfalls mentions that bhikshus and bhikchunis all should hold the eight aspects of the fast. And so this particular tantra of confessing downfalls is very thick. It's 1 or 2 volumes. It's a very, very thick text. It's too long to read, really. At any rate, it does say in this text that even the bhikshus and the bhikchunis should take the Mahayana Sojong vows. Now, so here the question comes up as to whether it's okay to take the Mahayana Sojong vows or not for monastics. If it is okay to take the Mahayana Sojong vows, then that contradicts where it is said in other scriptures that taking a day-long vow will cancel out the lifelong vows that you've already taken. But if it is not okay, then it contradicts the Tantra where it says that it is okay for bhikshus and bhikchunis to take the vows.
Kisi rabdu chungwa chigi tiwa chimi sojong domba lane da sunja nyene sunja yala gyabu deliya nene da tiring ni sani nima masha padu mato sunga mi sansaro dide chena nada nyengarab disi yor da sani nima masha padu sunga ide pencho sunga mi sansaro da jiga orba da samdongdan dide ma yinba che jidang kurang gelong labse nalo la di yela gewo de songlo tön chang de yare tön chang yare de ibine misegi ji simge ru chen misegi da karshura da ji koran sojong ko choga na sumba dan singi mugi meber chawa da ne meber chawa da de sumba dan singi ane ji lungba le ya mugi ru de chong ane lungba le ne yam ru de chong an da na ji ji so so gi ben phama da so so chong bo ru de 내 나사로 내 중배 걸이야 미세도 전주셔도 쌤게 아니 전주셔도 쌤게네 안 남윤에 하나들 숨게 아니 산이야 파버도 될래야 믹스 까르네 섬을 바지 쌤게 야심보다 제외 토네 아니 지 숨게 섬을 되지 셰비나 아니 dombatonre 냥가스 미세 메데베 소치 라베 쌤게를 체체 되지 토네 니마 마샤바도 숨게 디펜지 숨게 민 삼박기자 말해 니마 마샤바도 믹스해체네 가르쳐 섭섭으로 제제 낸덴체제 숨게 삼박지 마도 남지용 아저지 랍잖아 여다 여러데 텔 미세 낸덴체네 바요 전시 때네 쉽지기 가르쳐에 당도를 챘는데 개치고 버려 근데 이르잖아 드디 셰비미나 아니 야고레스 드디 숨어라
I think that here there is a difference in the intention. So when a monastic takes the Mahayana Sojong vows, if they take the vows thinking, it depends on how they think of it, how they're thinking when they take the 8 vows of the fast. If they take the vows thinking, I'm taking these vows and I'm only going to keep them from now until the sun rises tomorrow, then there's a danger. And so there's a danger that they'll cancel out the vows if they're thinking they'll only keep them until the sun rises tomorrow. But if you don't do that, if you take the Mahayana Sojong vows, actually within the Bhikshu vows, all 8 of the precepts of the Mahayana Sojong are fulfilled within the Bhikshu vows. But if you make the particular resolve or have the particular intention that you're doing this, as it says in the ritual for taking the vows, it says that there may be no famine, that there may be no illness, and so forth. So if in the region where you're living there is a famine, or if there is an epidemic, or if your parents or your friends fall ill, and with that in mind, you make it a particular resolve of bodhicitta to achieve great enlightenment. You think, I normally keep these vows, but from now until tomorrow morning, I'm going to be especially careful about keeping the vows. And if you keep them, keep these precepts as related to that particular intention, then there is no danger of losing your vows. It is that you have this particular resolve to do this. It's not that you're thinking, I'm only going to keep them until the sun rises tomorrow and then I'm not going to keep them. Instead, it's that I'm going to be particularly careful about keeping them. Normally, we are not really very careful or do not put a lot of interest in them. And so this is saying that we're going to be especially earnest and careful about keeping the vows for the next 24 hours. And if we do that, then there is no danger.
고문남기 차시라요. 되네 김바드데 아주 표현을 여러데 참서 김바드도 닝네 손 닝네를 내네 되래. 닝네 손 시베걸. 어디걸이야 라마 고문남기 가르쳐서는다 디걸레데 김바드도 남규기 쿠란도 김바드도 짠 저거 말았어. 다 디걸로 그 전주서도 섬기에. 대리의 인사 아니 전주서 말했어. 전주서 봐. 자주스마 인두산에 지당기 남중기 갤론 드라스 갤론 잠실에 아니 자주스마디 고 가르소에 하장기 비 가르소 학번도지 자주스마디 개발도 파버도지 지당기 갤론 잠실에 아니 자주스마디 개발도 파버도 차리 인두산에 안다 유 가르소에 소남지신 상부시직 차리 알았어 근데 인두산에 델레야 그래서 김바드스 년에 송배걸이야 진인구를 쳐야 된대. 그 얘기하면서 인구를 쳐야 되는데 제비는 사람 전부 연구를 했는데 순거 알아. 다 대양 대양 거라做的 섬게들이야. 공부 写 이스라엘. 되는 주제다.
Now, what many masters of the past have said is that, and this is something that was practiced in my own homeland, when there are householders who keep the fast and they have the Mahayana Sojong vows, then at that time, what the lamas have said is that those householders who are keeping the Mahayana Sojong vows in the fast are different from regular householders. Because they have the resolve of bodhicitta, they become bodhisattvas. And so in that way, they become different, they become superior. In fact, because they're bodhisattvas, these bodhisattvas, that is the householders keeping the fasting, keeping the fast, are superior to regular bhikshus. And so they become a good field for accumulating merit. And so for that reason, if there are householders who are keeping the Mahayana Sojing vows, then there's a great merit in making offerings and paying respect to them. And this is primarily said with their attitude of bodhicitta in mind.
지당의 겸주 사대 동제 겸주기 동바 동제의 조디 상계 군조 방법입니다. 아니 겸주 동바 동제스 최고조의 기도 군조 방법에는 겸주 동바 데 가서 다조 동교에 메사데 버지 接不起来的这些，做的商业的现在各位他这点比这夹现出去这里啊夹点比米呢夹不到么动作以外个些好嘞这里啊你们大部分不起的 tabe gombo nalo ya gyamdre domba tela tungji gi gyuji da nyamje gi gyuji namba ni yes tungji gi gyude sangge le shen ge wi gyab shen chwa de tungji gi gyu yes 다 냠제 규고 나로래야 되네 심제를 차와차다 내가 그래서 담배 취게 랍제기 운동조 심제를 차와차다 되네 저 디베 저보다 더 발라서 받으죠 냠제기 규인 수를 소하래
Now, when we talk about the vow of going for refuge, the primary factor that would cancel this is if we reject the jewel of the Buddha. If we reject the jewel of the Buddha, then this cancels our vow of going for refuge. If we reject the Dharma or reject the Sangha, then that is whether or not that cancels our vow of refuge needs examination. In any case, rejecting the Buddha means if we search for refuge in some worldly refuge other than the Buddha, then this will cancel our vow of going for refuge. The source for this is in the writings of the collected writings of Gampopa. In the writings of Gampopa, he distinguishes between the violations that cancel the refuge vow and those that weaken the refuge vow. The violations that cancel the refuge vow is to reject the jewel of the Buddha, whereas the violations that weaken the vow include having malice towards sentient beings, harming other sentient beings, which is the opposite of the precepts of the Dharma, or associating with harmful friends. And so those would be vows that weaken, or those would be actions that weaken the vow.
다드네 레다 겸드 랍샤라요 텐슈네 숨이 겸드 랍샤다 명아르 추 겸드 랍샤 나버 니여비 메레 텐슈네 쇼데 찬슈 다 땡아주 다 로베 통매기 지게 사땡아레 숨비 사땡안 나로레 숨데베게 네 랍샤지게 하래 근데 명아르 추 사데 조지반데 어디샤네마 지베규네 저 까담베기 다 송줄이 좀 명아 지가베 랍자도 주베 랍자도 체딩 랍자사르데 다 되게 명아를 좀 랍자도 있습니다.
Now, for the precepts of the refuge vow, there are two different types. There are those that are found in the treatises, and then those that come from the tradition of the instructions. The precepts that come from the treatises include those that are taught by that were taught by Asanga in his 5 texts on the Bodhisattva bhumis and so forth. Those that come from the tradition of instructions are those that were taught by Asanga and passed down through the Kadampa tradition. These include the prescriptions, the proscriptions, and the conducive precepts. These different precepts come from the tradition of the instructions. And so tomorrow I will speak about the precepts of refuge in brief.
다 디고래 미세 다 단한 관시원은 신에 상기 좀 된데 때다 간다라 관시원은 시기다 멤버도 붙여야 멤버도 붙여야 왜 인주사는 멤버 개발 되기에 아니 가수에다지 아주 제 멤버 개발 되기 아주 레뉴기 딱 간다라 네디 테레 죄외체도다 매망 붙이 가래 다 매망 못함지 가수지 다 아주 벤 참바로 나이미나 아주로 고야데 참배매를 마도베기 매유제디 세잖아 저거 말아 봐 드린 유상한도 참배면 고아래 참발에 참배면 고아래 다가는 신경 고나는 고면 고아래 저거나 펜배면 고아래 드린 유산에 디소소소면 다 되는 신경 소소소 펜배면 다들 송아래 드린 유산다 매소 매번 매소샤버디 애는 아주지 저 개회 신예 기면데 당 안술이야 가서지 상계마 지기 마 맨들이 땅고래 사데 에네 개회신이 졸라 되네 딱 개회신이다 기둥 소리 차대 오르바다 레이드 디 졸라 되네 안줄 맨디 총도 알아 다 개치슈데 안줄 랭겐 개치슈데 가르쳐야 요르스나 맨 사야드레 아들이 인도스탄에 최양을 차드레 최양을 체 수시는 냠소래야데 다 개심버래 잠도 망고 시에나 마시에나 다 가다 최수시는 냠을 차들레 시에나 교다 망고지 민도 아들이 인도스탄에 최수시는 냠을 마셔야 입니다 냠을 체는 라레 마다라 입니다 다 잠도 몸지서 봐서 되네 배하스게만 드린 인도스탄에 남경아서 온좀 무시던 왜 걸이야. 오늘에다 몸식 나는 몸 당보대 가라서 남주 뒤사 차세와라 몸 직즈가 하는데 오늘에는 잠좀 몸지사. 다이면에 잠좀 몸지사데다 칸에 잠좀 몸지사데디 주시 측이 잠으로. 다들 주시 된기 잠으로디 오늘에는 닝타완에 겹서라. 겹서라데 내가 쉬원하지 겹수치 니 삼바로 드리지 삼년나 텐데버 좀해봐 딱 뒤송비 상계리 이체유에나 상계 시딱 제사 맞잖아 상계 시에 깨자를 이지 제고로 깨자 이지 젠디 시에 깨자는 신체는 제고로 배나 멤버를 이체유에나 멤버에 강라버는 시 제고로 시에마다 멤버를 이체유에서라데 딱 가슴 sức 지죠 멤버를 이체유에서라 멤버에 강라버지 맞제시 제일 친질로 제샤나 멤버를 이제 유사데 저 가슴 쓰점을 차로래 근데 인도스탄 디균자데네 대수 섬령에 버치제 잠로 가슴 쓰점도 마성와 또 저디 최리아베 가르소에 냠내를 쳐라래부터 또 제비미나 근데 레뉴기 내려 쳐야지 그거 알아서 인도스탄 다 띵아주 내바다 멤버당 된제기 삼도단지 직삼당민 디지 수소를 초나 체르지 요거면서 드릴 정도
It's as I was just saying, if we think of the Buddha like a doctor, like a skilled doctor, we want to be cured of the disease of karma and the afflictions. Now there are many different medicines that can cure us of the disease. Like if you have the flu, you have to take the flu medicine. It doesn't help you if you have the flu to take all the medicines that there are. What you need to take when you have the flu is flu medicine. Otherwise, all the other medicines won't help you. Likewise, if you have a headache, you take a medicine for headaches. If you have a stomach ailment, you take the medicine for your stomach ailment, and so forth. You take the particular men for that is taught for, that is indicated for the particular illness that you have, and then you have to take it as you are directed to take it. And so the spiritual master teaches us. They're the instructions that the Buddha taught, and these come down and we're given them by the spiritual master, the spiritual friend. And so the spiritual friend is like the Sangha, and they're like the nurse in the Sangha. And so that is how we get the medicine. But the important thing is that we need to actually take the medicine. It doesn't do enough. It's not enough just to hear the medicine, to think about it. We have to actually respect it and take it, and that means that we need to practice the Dharma. It is only by practicing the Dharma that so it's important for us to practice the Dharma properly. So we often say, "I'm going for refuge to the Buddha. I go for refuge to the Buddha." But if we don't actually put it into practice, then it doesn't really help. If we don't actually put the true proper Dharma into practice, then even if we recite 100,000 refuge prayers, then it doesn't help us at all. we often do the 4 preliminary practices where we do the 400,000s. And the first of these, we talk about the first as being 100,000 prostrations, but it's actually not really 100,000 prostrations. It actually should be going for refuge 100,000 times. And when we talk about going for refuge 100,000 times, it doesn't mean that we just go for refuge out with the words. Merely reciting the words is reciting the words that signify. What we need to do is go for refuge in meaning, in the meaning that they signify. And so that is the actual refuge. So it is not merely thinking to ourselves, oh, I'm going for refuge. So it is thinking that we have, if we actually believe in the Buddha, then to put it bluntly, then we need to believe what the Buddha said. And then we need to actually do what the Buddha says. It's like if you're sick and you go to the doctor, and if you believe in the doctor, then you're going to do the treatment that the doctor tells you to do. Otherwise, if the doctor prescribes a treatment and then you don't do it, it's not going to, if you don't take the treatment, it's not actually going to do you any good. And so when the doctor prescribes medicine or prescribes a treatment, then you have to carry through on that treatment. And so this is something we need to remember. It is the same with going for refuge. It doesn't help us to just do it by words and to do it orally in our mouths. It's something that we actually have to do for practice. And so for that reason, just merely reciting the words of going for refuge is not enough. If we actually practice the Dharma properly, then this is something that can liberate us from the illness of karma and afflictions. And so I think that in this way, if we think about this analogy of the doctor and the illness and the medicine, then I think this can give us a greater feeling for what refuge really means.
드레이 두사는 아주 취념린 제신도 어느 군조스물이야 봐 타니어르니어르 신체 당기 권도 쉬반난 신경랑 톱저를 끼버서 말로 딱 안들지 상기 군조리야 지 군조스물이야 타니어르니어르 신체 단도나 타마들이야 르니 군조스물기다 오르 끼버지 되지고 아래 대 교르 채벌이야 고 가르 니머르 레신도 베네지 수수 나말레 추수 치마데 고조선 타니를 로가지 그다 에너지 니마지레 니마 제마데 고조선 타니를 로가지 단도는 아주 데르지고다 빠나 나 가수에 빠나 가르지면 다 표현해 주 가수 표현제 야알이야 용벌에 근데 이제가 다는 신기 가수인비네 코알레 표현에 에네 상계 공부를 반조고 그래. 이내 가족이 제라는 망고지 가르잖아. 상계 공부를 전에 코알이야 수용된 게 없이. 아들이 차디가 그래. 인도스탄에 지 삼성 가족 제라는 파 전족에도 수 전족에 하고 뭐도 아들이 인도스탄에 디규젤 되네. 간다래야지. 니만 가서에 메신도지 수수기 셈리야 메바당 타고 나와 쳇쳇 아니 잠바다니 쳇쳇 시럽도 쳇쳇로 알아 진리지 나 간다 왜 니수 돌이야 간다 요한로지 랑기 심기 경보디 시시 뒤와야 알아지 진리지 초리야 안 로고야데 개점 쉬우래 진리지 초리야 로토 의미나 아는 거 그저 숨나다 계속 좋아서는 안도 कुजोसुम थानियर रोसना रादो जनी जीवन मेवे नेलिया नेते दाम थानियर नि रोआछि तो शादी और हिंदुस्तान है अंते सामिक थोड़ा शाको शारना शाही
And so when we practice the Dharma, we should be getting closer and closer to the three jewels. As we practice the Dharma, we get closer. We can say this is, when we talk about the jewels that we need to achieve, this means that we are getting closer, that these are the jewels that we will become. We need to get closer and closer to the three jewels so that eventually we will ourselves become the three jewels. And in order to do this, every day we need to get closer and closer to the three jewels. From 1 hour to the next, we need to come closer to the three jewels. From one day to the next, we need to come closer. We need to come closer to the three jewels. It's like with myself. I fled Tibet and came to India. And in the same way, we need to flee samsara and get to the state of Buddhahood. But the way we practice, sometimes it seems like we're fleeing Buddhahood and going closer to samsara. And so we don't actually know whether we're moving forward or backward in our practice. But in any case, every day we should just gradually try to have more faith in. We need to have more faith and pure perception in our minds. We need to increase our loving kindness and compassion. We need to increase our prajna. And so it needs to be so that in actuality, so that we are in actuality taming and pacifying our unruly minds, and it's important for us to do this. And so in this way, we need to go for refuge to the three jewels. We need to get closer to the three jewels. We need to bring ourselves to a place where there is no longer any fear, and it is important for us to remember this.